Sir in the back.
Getting back to like international.
And we're going to take a break at 2.
Okay. Before you were talking about dictators and how you shouldn't put any dictator in a corner, I lived in Korea for the last 5 years or so, and I was wondering, of course, and what do you think should be done about North Korea? How do you handle that?
Well, you know, the Chinese are handling North Korea. I think our biggest mistake was basically staying on the Korean Peninsula in the first place. We have 750 bases all over the world. I mean, there's a wonderful DVD called How We Fight, and I'm coming right to you. There's a wonderful DVD called How We Fight, and it basically links wars with pulling people out of poverty or creating poverty and then having a war as a kind of a cycle. Vietnam, in fact, there's now some very interesting documentation coming out that we went into Vietnam knowing it was the wrong war for the wrong reason and that it would cost us 50,000 casualties in the last 10 years. There's a wonderful book also by a guy, first-time author, Michael Hume, called Who the Hell Are We Fighting? And it features Sam Adams, who is complaining one day that here we are in a guerrilla war and the Pentagon isn't letting us count the guerrillas. Okay, and then it has another really excellent quote from Sherman Kent asking Sam Adams, are we reaching the boundaries of reasonable dishonesty? Okay, well, reasonable dishonesty is what your government is all about, and that's wrong. Why don't you jump up and give me something there?
Yeah. What are your thoughts on Arizona's immigration law, the Azatlan movement, and the imminent amnesty reform?
What was the middle one?
The Azatlan movement. You know, the Southwest belongs to Mexico?
Oh, well, it does, actually. The Guadalupe Hidalgo Treaty, they've retaken it. They had a lot of babies. You know, the bottom line here, and I say this as someone who does have Latino blood. My mother was born in Colombia. First off, it's really fascinating, and I do want to get in, I think, after the break, because I've got to go to the bathroom. But after the break, if you want, I would love to get into this whole issue of health of nations and artificial political boundaries and how much trouble we've created with webs of deceit and so forth. But the reality is we burned all of the land ownership records of the Mexicans in the first place so that we could then drive them out at gunpoint. And there's a lot to be said for the fact that they've simply naturally recovered what we took away from them illegally in the first place. Now, having said that, I strongly support Arizona's immigration endeavors because the federal government is no longer setting floors, it's now setting ceilings on everything, including environmental protection. The federal government is now the enemy of the public interest. Let's stop on that note. I'm going to go to the bathroom. I realize a lot of you are tired, but I will stay as long as anybody wants to have a question. We'll put it on video, and then someone can do YouTubes to their heart's content. So I'll be back in 5 minutes. Evaluation that was independent of the contractors. Today, we don't do operational test and evaluation. In fact, I don't think we've ever tested a nuclear missile. We can't find a lot of them right now, okay? I mean, this is just amazing, absolutely amazing. And secrecy is used to cover all of this up. The services are out of control. The Air Force hasn't built a decent airplane since the A-10. I'm friends with Chuck Spinney and indirectly with Pierre and others. You know, I mean, we need stuff that's long loiter. For example, the average aviation day in the DoD is warm and not humid. Well, the real world day is hot and humid. And what that means is your load, your lift, and your loiter are cut in half. But we don't build airplanes to a hot day or a humid day. And oh, by the way, the Navy likes to be really big ships that stay 200 clicks offshore, which means you end up having 5 minutes of air cover. And when you're in a low-intensity conflict like Somalia, the Air Force insists on 8-hour days for its pilots. So Puff the Magic Dragon has to go home to the air conditioning when the Marines are getting fired on. You know, all of this is just nuts. I mean, I couldn't make this stuff up. It's like a nightmare. In the back, sir.
Sure. A friendly stranger asked me about this because I hadn't actually thought about it, and I wanted to bring it to you. Is there anything that you can talk about in terms of contrails coming out of airplanes and potential planting of neurotoxins and control of a population in that regard? And is that something is that something that's actually going on or that you know anything about?
The short answer is no, but I'm very concerned about the thing that we lack in the U.S. government is honest oversight. And I don't know anything about contrails, but I do have some knowledge of some of these secret camps with a couple thousand men without a country, and U.S. servicemen being asked whether they'd be willing to disarm U.S. citizens, and Halliburton building prison camps here in the U.S. I mean, there's an awful lot of stuff where the dots have not been connected in a proper way for the public. And I'm not the person who can connect them for you, but I think this is the kind of stuff we need to be acutely sensitive to. And I personally am licensed to carry a concealed weapon, and I do. I think every single one of us should be armed, and very, very dangerous. Because our founding fathers understood that if the citizens were not educated and not armed, they would be turned into sheep under tyranny. And my biggest disappointment with Ron Paul is he's play acting being a libertarian. He's not actually doing it. And that's a mistake, because I think between Jesse Ventura and Ron Paul, and I'd throw Sarah Palin in there. I mean, you got to have something to get the Pentecostals in, okay? So, I mean, I actually like Sarah Palin. I think she has enormous potential. And what's that? Yes, I actually drove to Des Moines and talked the Secret Service into letting me put a memorandum under his door. And this hotel was sold out. I talked a woman of color on the desk into putting me into one of the two rooms the Secret Service had blocked on either side of Obama's room. And I took that room, and then I went down to the business center and I typed up a memo saying, this is what's going to happen to you, and you really need to govern strategically, and you really need to do intelligence-driven government and all of this jazz, and showed it to a Secret Service guy, gave him my Social Security number. He could care less at that point. And then I slipped it under his door. And not only did I never hear from him again, but my 20 faxes to David Plouffe and to David Axelrod and to Oprah Winfrey, whose private fax number I was able to get, went unanswered, okay? Obama was there to win the election. He was not there to govern in the public interest. And that is my disappointment in Obama. I actually had a website called freeobama.net, and I had that picture. Did you all see the picture of Obama and Bush? Let me see if I can get it up on the screen here. But, you know, Obama could still take control of his own government, and he could still be the greatest president we ever had.
I think it's too late.
It may be too late. I mean, judging by this healthcare fiasco, and you guys wanted to talk about healthcare, it comes in 4 parts. Part 1 is healthy lifestyle. Part 2 is healthy environment without toxins. Part 3 is alternative and natural medicine, including banana oil for breast cancer. The AMA does not want you to know that. And then Part 4 is surgery and pharmaceuticals at a price we can afford. The rest of the world pays 1% of what we pay for the top 75 drugs, okay? And if you go to Thailand and South Africa and other places, you can buy all 75 of our top drugs for 1% of what we pay. I mean, that's nuts. Now, in the back there, and then we'll come forward.
How do you feel about the anti-vaccine movement and people like, that's a, yeah.
I actually support the anti-vaccine movement. I was very uncomfortable as a young lieutenant being treated as a guinea pig. I'll tell you what the bottom line is. The bottom line is the U.S. government does not know what it's doing. And when you get right down to it, the U.S. government is basically bullshitting you across a number of fronts. And until we get this fragmentation of knowledge thing done, all right, now I can't see my own screen. Let's see, F5? What? Yes, I am clueless. You're absolutely right. Some things I do well, like clueless. How do I see my own screen?
Function key and then one of the keys that has a monitor icon on it.
Ah, okay.
Possibly an F4, maybe function F4.
All right, let's try that. Function F4, no. Function F1. Yeah, except this is a Dell computer from 2005.
CRT LCD right there.
Oh, I can't read. CRT. All right, function CRT LTD.
That's control, yeah.
You're an amazing human being.
You gotta hit it again.
Function, okay.
Should be both now. Good to go.
All right. There's a slide I want to show you guys on the fragmentation of knowledge, but I've completely forgotten what I was talking about. What was it? Oh, anti-vaccine. I've lost my train of thought, but the bottom line, what?
It's getting late, don't worry about it. You felt uncomfortable. You felt uncomfortable.
The face.
Oh, right, the George Bush Obama.
Now, I have to tell you, I did not create this incredible morph, and if I can ever find the person who did, I'd like to acknowledge them permanently and really express my appreciation, because this is the best morph I've ever seen. I had my graphics artist do one, and I've got it in here someplace, but this is the best. There is absolutely no difference between Obama and Bush. If you look at Treasury, I mean, all the ambassadors in Latin America are still the ones that were appointed under Bush. Hillary Clinton is a nice lady, but she doesn't know jack shit about Latin America. It's really, truly unfortunate. We do not have a State Department that's actually thinking about waging peace. So that's the thing. Yes, sir, and then we'll come back to you.
Who do you think the next president is going to be? A Republican or a Democrat?
Does it matter?
I know, but if it is a Democrat, do you think it'll be Hillary?
I don't think so. I mean, I'll tell you something. The Secret Service guys hate her. And they don't hate her because of all of her female guests. They hate her because she was an absolute bitch to them. And she mistreated them and abused them in ways that they will never forget. And so if she ever runs for president, I have been told by a Secret Service officer they will release the list of her guests. So I don't know. But my personal feeling is we have an opportunity to put someone like Jesse Ventura into office. I have actually worked with people to create a coalition cabinet. And this is why Ron Paul pisses me off so much, because he has an opportunity to play nice with Ralph Nader and Cynthia McKinney and Jackie Salet, who's an American hero. I mean, what Jackie Salet did for Bloomberg, which he then really screwed her over by going for a third term. You guys have heard the joke that when Clinton found out that Bloomberg could get a third term, he said, "You can do that?" But anyway, so I mean, we have some real heroes here in America, but they're not playing well with each other. I mean, I'd bring Lee Iacocca in if he's still alive as a chief of staff, and I would create a coalition cabinet as a sunshine cabinet, and I would make intelligence-driven policy with a balanced budget, and I'd post it. And I'd say, "Excuse me, if we can do this, why can't you?" And then that's the point at which corruption comes in. Come to the mic and get into this.
It's not in their best interest to play nice because they're it's not in their interests to play nice, because then their personal agendas would be abrogated by actually having to do something.
Then in that case, drive them the fuck out of office and stop listening to them and start over. And frankly, Jesse Ventura is as good as it gets. You know, I mean, any one of us could be a better president than the ones we've got now. All it takes is integrity. And one of the things that I've been told is Obama's afraid of being assassinated. And that's not an unreasonable fear. I owe you the mic, so please go there and then we'll come back.
Do you think Fidel Castro is dead? And if so, when will we ever find out about it?
He spoke to me yesterday.
Really?
I don't think he's dead. Actually, I think he just came out publicly speaking on something. And it was over an hour, so we know it's Fidel. And so, no, I don't think he's dead. I think he had a logical turnover. And, you know, it's a real shame that Cuba had to be so screwed up. And one of the interesting things about Cuba is it's been pointed out to me that the rest of Latin America learned two things from the Cuban experience, including the Bay of Pigs. One, they learned how screwed up the U.S. was and how the U.S. could not make the Bay of Pigs stick, and that we actually, with Cuba, caused an extreme right overreaction. And basically, we put dictators into power, or dictators came to power in Latin America because they were acutely aware of the fact that Castro had succeeded in Cuba. So, you know, and we'll get to this whole issue of national artificial boundaries and indigenous peoples and so forth. Quick comment?
Actually, something you had mentioned triggered the thought. Do you see any hope in decentralizing government and giving back our power to local governments and actually building stronger local governments and taking care of our world that way, as opposed to having this centralized authority which is doing absolutely nothing for us?
Well, there's a two-part answer to that. The first part, and I learned this in reading Deer Hunting with Jesus, is our local governments are just as corrupt as our national government. And one of the things I didn't realize was that across America, the Rotary Club and the Planning Council and all of that, they're making sweetheart deals with corporations. They're giving them tax breaks. They're giving them public land. They're making theirs on commissions. But they're screwing over the public because they're basically giving up all of the taxes that would pay for proper education at the local level. So part one of the answer is no elite can be trusted. We actually have to get back to practical participatory democracy with complete transparency, and we have to control how our dollars are spent. And I'm not sure where we're going. But the fact that we're all starting to talk about this, the fact that women in Kuwait can now swarm and do a flash mob and then disappear, this is cool. And so we're moving in the right direction. And I really think we're going to reach a tipping point sometime in the next 5 to 10 years. But coming back to this, we should not elect a Republican or a Democrat. In fact, the League of Women Voters, I'm still angry at them. No, I'm over the anger. I'm disappointed. The League of Women Voters was running a perfectly good presidential debate function. But the presidential campaigns, the presidential debates that they were running allowed third, fourth, and fifth candidates, and they were demanding that they ask questions that were not provided beforehand. And so the Republicans and the Democrats got together and they created the debate commission for two parties only, and they threw the League of Women Voters out of the debate business, and the League of Women Voters let them get away with it. That is so wrong. They should have raised holy hell and said no sex for a year, okay, unless we get the presidential debates back. That was a lack of integrity on the part of the League of Women Voters. They let them get away with it. And I would like to see the League of Women Voters, which I do respect very much, get back into the presidential debate business as well as governors and so forth. In the back there, sir.
Hi, just a quick question. How do you feel about the educational system today and the job training that goes on in schools?
Well, I've reviewed Weapons of Mass Instruction by Gotti, who got a teacher's award here in New York and is now retired, and Orbiting the Creative Hairball and so forth. I mean, our schools beat the creativity out of our children, and most of us are survivors of the school system. We're into rote learning, memorization of useless old facts. In fact, in my monograph on human intelligence, I have this chart, and there's a literature on digital natives. It's actually a book title and a meme and so forth. No, you're not. I'm a digital immigrant, okay? My kids laugh at me. But you guys are digital natives, and your children are going to be superpowers. So digital immigrants like to teach to the book, have a school solution. Everybody sits quietly in their chair. It's competitive. Whereas digital natives want to be entertained. They want to multitask. They want to learn what's useful in the moment. They know how to search and retrieve. They want to do team learning. They want to learn how to learn. You know, I mean, we've blown it. We've absolutely blown it. And if I were God, I think the next president needs a Secretary of Education, Intelligence, and Research, and we should strip the intelligence community and use that to fund proper education and research. And by the way, I would basically eliminate the Boy Scouts, but keep the merit badges. Oh, all right. I've touched an American icon. Well, get rid of the uniforms and the salutes, you know. That's my Cub Scout salute. Okay. No, the merit badges are the coolest thing on the planet. And I think every kid should have to earn every merit badge before they go to college. And we need to have apprenticeships in the trades. And we need to have apprenticeships in the professions. I mean, if you can't hammer a nail and turn a screw, you're useless to society. Okay? What? Facebook merit badge. That's a contradiction in terms. All right. I will go as long as you guys want. Don't feel embarrassed about being a non-hacker and going to bed. What's
you hit a tax question.
Yes.
So I have a tax question. And don't boo me out of the room.
No.
But there's this guy on the radio where I live, and he's syndicated.
Where do you live?
I live in Atlanta. Named Neil Bortz, who's dead set on this fair tax thing, which I see several flaws in. But I mean, have you read up on this?
No,
this
and I'm not
at all?
smart enough to make tax policy. I just know when we're being screwed.
Well, basically, the idea is that you go to a flat tax on a flat national sales tax like a VAT and no corporate tax, and I just don't see how in the world it adds up. A, and B. Okay, so you got money in the bank. Well, now I get double taxed again. I can't see how we can ever change the tax system that we've set up, because it's the first, isn't it the first or second largest federal employer? I mean, if you change the IRS, you create a mass unemployment problem.
Well, if you change the IRS, you eliminate a mass privacy issue too. And you know, the bottom line here, and this is a good opportunity to kind of talk about capitalism and then segue into how we organize the world. Capitalism was originally intended to be in the public service, and Howard Bloom has written a very nice book on the genius of the beast, and it's about the reinvention of capitalism, and I recommend it highly. Let's see, Bloom, where are you, Bloom? Here you go. I won't explode this, it's too complicated, but basically all of my reviews are easily available here. I'll tell you what you can do for me is hack Amazon and the voting system, because they're pandering to the new people who are pissed off that guys like me have been doing this since the year 2000. And so they're now counting negative votes and they're deleting old reviews. So if you like my reviews, you can click here, and that takes you to Amazon, where you can, if you wish, vote for the review or against the review, as you please. You can also do a comment. I check comments daily, and I engage in dialogue on Amazon. But Howard's book, a guy named Hart has written a book called Capitalism at the Crossroads. Yanis just wrote a book about social business. Essentially, capitalism right now is very badly organized, and financial capitalism shouldn't be allowed at all. Because basically we've allowed Wall Street to create fraud, just like Maurice Strong is creating fraud with the carbon thing. That's nothing more than a subprime mortgage for the earth, okay? Yeah, it is, absolutely. I think we need to rethink capitalism. I personally think that this whole idea of asset accumulation is wrong, and that the indigenous peoples had it right when they understood that Mother Earth was for us to steward. And I'll recommend to you a book called 1491, which is about everything that the Mayans and the Aztecs knew before Christopher Columbus. They had 25,000 miles of paved road. They were doing deep root farming in the Amazon that did not disturb the Amazon. They kept the water clean. And similarly, I mean, in Peru and other places where they've nationalized water and where they're talking about pricing water and stuff, the companies are complaining because the indigenous people have learned how to do agriculture with drip irrigation. They're not using enough water. Well, that's the wrong paradigm, okay? So we really need to regroup and grasp indigenous knowledge and integrate indigenous knowledge. We need to take the profit out of waste. I mean, PricewaterhouseCoopers did a great study on healthcare and demonstrated that 50% of every healthcare dollar is waste. And the reason that persists is because we're in a cost-plus system where the profit is based on the totality of the expenditures, and there is no incentive for eliminating waste. So this is a very, very interesting thing. And capitalism and nation statehood go together. McIver on the origin or the function of the state is still very worthwhile reading, and one of my master's papers on the origin and failure of the state is also worth reading. It's on Phi Beta Iota under my early papers. The state is supposed to do the things that are not worth doing for corporations but are essential services of common concern. That does not include 90% of what the U.S. government does or does not do. So I do believe in sharply shrinking the government. I also believe in this concept that the government should not be spending money that is not approved by the public or by the congressional representatives. And we've completely lost touch with that. I mean, we kind of send the money and throw it away. So going to the nation state now, we totally hosed Latin America and Africa by creating artificial boundaries. There's a wonderful book by Philip Allott out of Cambridge called The Health of Nations. And what he talks about is how these artificial boundaries totally hosed indigenous arrangements, tribal arrangements that had been developed over centuries. And so we actually created the seeds for conflict. We created the seeds for tribal wars. And we have also, more often than not, empowered minorities, because the colonialism period tended to pick one of the groups and elevate them to become the black Englishman, if you will. And so these minorities then became profiteers, using government power to repress the majorities. I mean, if you look at Iraq, it was the minority Sunnis as officers and the Shiites as enlisted guys. And I mean, I had here 2 or 4 years ago some passionate guy from Saudi Arabia talking about how government examinations basically require Shiites to say that Shiites are pieces of shit who should never be hired, and only Sunnis are really true Muslims. Okay? Yeah, no, Rwanda's the same thing, he says. So what we have here is a real conflict. And I personally believe that diversity is very important. We have destroyed over 2,000 languages in the last 40 or 50 years. We have 5,000 secessionist movements, and if I were God, I would encourage every single one of them. Because the reality is we don't need foreign ministries and all these government bureaucracies and so forth. Most of life should come down to being really, really prosperous at the local level and self-sufficient. Yes, sir.
Just
just want to pick up on the secessionist comment. What do you think of the Greek economy, and is there any chance that Germany's going to try to get out of the EU?
I think that the Greeks were really screwed by Goldman Sachs, which committed a major crime, as it has with other countries. I mean, those guys are lucky they're not being hunted down and killed, because they have really hosed the global economy. I think Germany should get out of the European Union. The European Union, let me rephrase that. The European Union has been an interesting success, but at the same time it has destroyed diversity. And I'm not an economist, but Chuck Spinney publishes a lot of stuff from economists on my website, not my website, but the Public Intelligence blog. So I'd recommend you've got an option here to select all of the stuff by Spinney. Here you go, headline Spinney, 67. And there's a lot of economic stuff in there. But he was featured on Time magazine in the 1980s as the first defense whistleblower of note, and nothing has changed since then. So we've got a real problem. I think diversity matters. I think national economies matter. I think national monetary systems are part of controlling your own fate and establishing valuations for yourself. So I'm not an economist, but I've learned not to trust economists. Yes, ma'am, sir.
Ma'am.
Darkness.
I'm a ma'am.
Okay.
Thank you. I hope this makes sense, but I was wondering if I could have your thoughts on special education, the over-medication, under-education of students labeled as disabled, and when we could engage them if we taught them to value deep rather than surface learning, but do not because schools are teaching to the tests out of fear of losing resources.
Well, I agree, and I admire the people who go into special education. I kind of have, it's like a three-part answer. Is number one, we really ought to do a better job of not having retarded children and of not having children that are basically caused by severe problems in our whole lifestyle, medical process, the whole 9 yards. So we're creating this problem. That's number one. Number two, I believe in euthanasia, and I think that there has to be a reasonable process for giving people choices between not being burdened with a child that they don't feel emotionally capable of handling, having that child go to a more nurturing environment, and certainly I believe in assisted suicide or assisted passing. By the way, Al Pacino does a hell of a job in the DVD on Dr. Death or whatever it's called. What's it? You Don't Know Jack. You're absolutely right. Yeah, it is very good. And one of the things that impressed me most is that Dr. Kevorkian turned away 90% of the people that sought his assistance. Pacino really does a wonderful, wonderful job of portraying this doctor in a very responsible way. And finally, diversity really does matter. And, I mean, look at Stephen Hawking. He's the poster child for not killing the retarded because the retarded are often brilliant at something. And so I put diversity into the subtitle of my new book with great deliberation. And so I hope that kind of answers your question. Are we done?
No.
All right. I'm ready for any question. Oh, dwarfs. I think dwarfs have a legitimate right to be thrown for money.
How is,
whatever you can lift and throw.
How is open source intelligence and WikiLeaks different? Or the same?
What is open source intelligence and?
WikiLeaks.
Oh.
So, or compare and contrast.
Sure.
Maybe.
WikiLeaks is mindless peeing. Open source intelligence pees with design.
Okay, I have a question regarding...
I mean, I can do more on open source intelligence. I don't mean to demean it. I've just spent the last 21 years doing it. Yes, sir.
Regarding green technology. As far as I see it, a lot of countries around the world are all acknowledging that global warming is happening. There's still the debate's still raging, but I think the general scientific community is starting to weigh in. And saying that,
yes, but let me interrupt and you'll continue. Number one, environmental degradation is threat number 3 from the high-level threat panel. Global warming is largely a fraud being funded by Maurice Strong so he can do carbon credits and Al Gore can double his 100 million. Okay? So global warming is actually a fraud, in my opinion. And it's certainly something that should be taken seriously, but I'll tell you something. Sulfur and mercury are vastly more important than carbon in terms of what we're doing to the environment overall, okay? So this is shitty science, shitty politics, and really filthy money. Go on from there.
That's actually completely irrelevant to the point I was trying to make. The point I was trying to make was that a lot of these countries want to raise the floor on various emission levels that you can put in. The caps on emission levels, pretty much saying you can't, lowering the emission levels, I guess. So saying that you can't emit less as much and then raising the restrictions. So, but they end up in a prisoner's dilemma kind of thing where they even start doing misinformation because if France, for example, raises the bar on restrictions on what they can emit, a lot of their businesses can just jump ship to the next neighboring country in Europe unless all the countries at the same time raise their level somewhat.
One of the things that troubles me, first off, biomimicry is a huge answer here. And I love the Bioneers Conference. It takes place once a year. We now know that bacteria is an energy solution as well as an anti-pollution solution. We're learning huge things about amoeba. And basically, we've been ignoring, for 50 years, we have been basically sleepwalking while we destroyed the earth. There's, number one, no reasonable way to demand of China and Brazil and Indonesia that they reduce their carbon emissions. I would say, fuck you.
Completely agree.
Just like they have said. Okay, now, number one. Are they going to say fuck you, though? Oh, they already have. Yeah, they already have, and they have every right to do so. However, as I try to stress in my various briefings, the whole point of civilization is to pass on lessons to others so that they don't pay the price you've paid to learn those lessons. And I got that from Will Durant, whose 1916 graduate thesis is now available as Philosophy and the Social Problem. It's utterly brilliant, and I've reviewed it if you want the Cliff Notes. And so I think really we should be focusing on doing holistic strategic analytics. We should be eliminating advertising as a tax deduction. We should be eliminating all of this plastic crap that sells for $5 but costs $100 to create in oil and emissions and chlorine. Pandora's Poison is a wonderful book on our chlorine-based life. And so I think rather than telling them to reduce their emissions, particularly since they've got billions of people more than we do, I think we should really be thinking strategically about how do we help them avoid our mistakes? How do we create living, sustainable communities? I think sustainable design has come a long way, cradle to cradle, all of this stuff. The long and the short of it is the only thing we have to offer them we're not offering, and that is reasonable alternatives. So I think it's time we start spending a lot of money and a lot of time on reasonable alternatives, starting with biomimicry and starting with eliminating all that crap that we shouldn't be making in the first place. That's the best I can do. Yes, sir.
Hi, I'd like to ask you about the twilight zone of the U.S. government. What can you tell us about the MK Ultra?
Was MK Ultra the LSD test? It happened. You got to understand that there's this mentality, and frankly, you really have to understand that there are too many Nazis that helped create CIA. And that whole attitude is pervasive. And when I told Mike Hayden he was absolutely wrong to go into rendition and torture, of course he ignored me. But the fact is, he was wrong. Rendition and torture are terrible evils, and Abu Ghraib is the poster child for why you don't want to go in directions like that. Because this stuff inevitably comes out. It inevitably comes out that we've killed an Italian waiter instead of, you know, whoever it is we were looking for. And there's so many books on the imprecision and ineffectiveness of national intelligence. I just won't go there. Now I've lost my train of thought again. Damn it. No.
Midget Nazis.
Oh, Nazis. All right, let me tell you about Acoustic Kitty. I mean, CIA put a video camera in a kitty cat, and they took it out for a test drive, and it saw another kitty cat in heat, ran across the street, and got run over. Okay? I mean, you know, we do lots of cool stuff, but the problem, the absolute fundamental problem in national intelligence is that we have substituted technology for thinking. Okay? And that's been one of my sound bites for a long, long time. I'm going to beg your indulgence. I have got to go to the bathroom. I mean, it's the price I pay for this stuff, but now I'm awake. So I will come back highly charged, and we'll go with you and then with you, sir. All right, I'm deeply, deeply honored by you guys, but you really have to get a life. But thank you. Sir. What? I have a life. What is that? Oh, yeah.
You don't need a computer for this question.
You know, I think this conference really needs a serious upgrade in technical reliability across the board. Yes, sir.
Simple question.
Simple question.
Dick Cheney and cross-dressing, true or false?
No, you know, I have to tell you that I believe that my source is the single most incredible bisexual in our world, and that when he says Dick Cheney is a cross-dresser, I have to believe it.
Another simple question. Hillary Clinton and Vince Foster, true or false?
You know, there may be occasions when she lowers her standards. All right, in the back there, please. Remember that I can't see.
Sure. Why do we see a change in tactics for the intelligence community, basically, and most specifically the Israeli Mossad? The last operation in Dubai was carried out in broad daylight, people smiling into cameras. Recently, the flotilla actually attack on the ship, on the volunteers, was also in broad daylight. Everybody was watching. And had video cameras. Exactly. And so why is that happening, and what's the, is there any purpose for having these operations done, you know, in front of the whole world?
Well, we have some distinguished neurosurgeons and psychoanalytic personalities here in the audience who could help us with that. And so I invite them to come forward if they want to comment, but I'll give you my take on it. Israel has become the Nazis, and they've lost their mind. And the United States government is following them right up that trail. The idea of building Palestinian ghettos, after Gandhi said that Palestine is to the Palestinians as France is to France, is just, to me, incomprehensible. And it is genocide on a massive scale. And I personally am very upset that the U.S. taxpayer pays 20% of the Israeli budget. And I'm also personally upset that we're giving tens and hundreds of billions of dollars in military assistance to the Arabs who haven't done jack shit for the Palestinians. And so I think it's time we actually have an intelligence-driven foreign policy. Well, the Arabs are sleazebags in their own way, okay? And I'm really talking about the dictators, not the bottom-up people. Why haven't the Arabs done anything for the Palestinians? I believe that the Arabs are racists and that the Palestinians are their black people. And they really, really treat them like shit, and yet they're God's people just as much as the Israelis. So I think we really need to look seriously at Palestine. I've also noticed one of the books that I reviewed, which I was stuck in Dallas. I had finished my serious book, so I had to buy 2 books in Dallas, and let's see what I ended up with. Let's just go home. This is a really cool book, and it shows maps of the biblical areas. Let's get down a little bit. You know, Jay-Z, who's out there selling books, has really done some tremendous posts and really enhanced the entire website. Okay, this is the Amos book, which I really recommend you take a good look at. Here's Peggy Holman's new book, Engaging Emergence. Citizen call centers, Open 311. I mean, there's so much we can do if we first off, get our cell phones and call centers done, get volunteers harnessed. Here's a really good guest review of a book on bureaucracy which talks about different things, and I recommend it completely. All right, let me get down, because one of the things that really impresses me is that the Palestinians have controlled the sea for the lower southern half of the Israeli coastline since time immemorial. And Gaza is actually a containment of what has been a historical Palestinian, I'm sorry, there's just so much stuff that gets loaded on this website. You really have to almost navigate it or visit it daily if you want to keep up, which I'm not trying to impose that on you, but okay, gross national happiness, very cool. By the way, if you do a search on my product, check your spelling, because it's amazing what people, oh shit, I corrected his spelling. He had gross notional happiness or something like that. Okay. Okay, Burning Man. How many people are going to Burning Man? Yeah, I wish too, but I'm planning to pop down $300 and do it. Hey, this is Dr. Dave Warner. You definitely want to get to know him. This guy makes you guys look like chicken shits. Okay? He is really good. He's not a hacker. He's a neurosurgeon who understands information technology, and that's a very dangerous combination. Okay, we're getting close, I think. I forget how much stuff we put up. Night Watch. Oh, this is my new monograph. This is the guy accused of the leak. Afghan from below. This is Lee Felsenstein, who invented the PC. He's a member of hackers in Silicon Valley. Damn it, I'm sorry, I've lost it. But anyway, this book on biblical maps shows basically what we need, I think, is a two-state solution. And also, the Israelis are delusional. I mean, they are going into minority status here big time. And I think the days of Russians pretending to be Jews to get out of Russia are over. So there's this real issue here, and I think they just, and also, by the way, the Middle East is all about water. And the Israelis have been stealing water from Arab aquifers. Their agriculture uses up 50% of the water, and it produces 4% of the GDP. Okay, and so they're really kind of sucking up water from multiple countries to pretend that they're making the desert green. Meanwhile, someone else has gone and turned the Dead Sea green. These people have gone into the Dead Sea. They have restored all of the ancient knowledge, which is why I focus so much on indigenous knowledge. They've restored the furrows, and they've managed to capture every single raindrop that falls over the course of a year, and they're now raising lemon trees and figs in the Dead Sea. That's what we should be doing. Okay? So over here, and then we'll go back over there.
And on that note, have you...
All right, this is your third time. So I'm going to really ask that this be the last time, because I love you being energetic, but I want to get some of those people in the back.
Totally.
Okay.
Ringing Cedar series, have you seen or read? If not, definitely check it out.
What series?
The Ringing Cedar series. It's a
No.
set of 9 books. covers a lot of topics, solutions to a lot of what we just
I'm
talked
one
about.
man. So many books, so little time. We're being blessed. I thought he was going to moon me.
Hi,
okay. Yes, Doctor.
I wanted to comment on what that person was commenting about, the reason why Arab governments are not helping the Palestinians. Here's a really simple reason. They don't want to, because helping the Palestinians is not in their best interest. They are using the issue of Palestine and the plight of the Palestinians to foment fragmentation among the Arab world, and it helps them stay in power. If they were to actually do something positive, if peace were to break out, God forbid, they would probably be overthrown within 5 years.
Thank you. I love
and
it.
I just wanted to ask you, if you look at your friend up there as a human being, he's actually, that one person has actually suffered a stroke and he's drooling out the corner of his mouth.
Which corner? Thank you very much. Kill the pig. Go vegan. What's that? No, you know, I'll tell you what, there's a wonderful book called The Average American. And this journalist spent 2 years going all over the United States looking for the average American. And a year and a half into the project, he thought he found the guy, and he interviewed him, and he told him about the project and stuff. And he was so impressed, he went away, he says, if this guy doesn't call me in the next 6 months, he's the average American. And the guy didn't, you know. I mean, no, he treats media the way I do. If they don't do their fucking homework, I'm not going to talk to them. So he goes back, and this guy's grilling, and he says, hey, you're the average American. And the guy says, wow, what an honor. I had goosebumps over that comment, because the average American has got more integrity and more brains and more heart than anybody in Washington that is an elected or appointed official. And that's what's wrong with this country, is the average Americans have lost touch with power. Gonzo? Yeah, Jesse Ventura will do fine. But the problem is, none of these guys have broken out of this partisan concept, okay? Loyalty to a partisan line is death for America, okay? Sir?
With all the problems in greed and corruption out there right now, in your opinion, which government or country do you think is on the right path?
No, the Nordics, hands down, followed by Iceland and the Netherlands and Singapore, which is kind of gentle authoritarianism. Now, by the way, in Singapore, you can't be elected unless you first have an MBA. I'm serious.
Depends how good the schools are.
What's that?
It depends how good the schools are.
The Singapore schools are very good, and the people in Singapore do their homework. You know, I'm a little upset with my kids because it's kind of like the generational thing. I was very lucky. I had American schools overseas, which are really just one step down from prep schools that really make you work, as opposed to prep schools that just prepare you for a gentleman's C at Yale. My boys have chosen to be hackers and to be very, very lazy about schoolwork. And I think it's a real credit to my oldest son that he got into the Rochester Institute of Technology on the merit of what he learned outside of school. And so I obviously love him no matter what he does, but that's a huge, huge accomplishment that he did with me not being anywhere around as a decent father. So I'm just very pleased about that. You know, go on in the back, please.
In Norway, there's a seed bank. I believe the Rockefellers, Monsanto, Archer Daniels Midland, and Gates Foundation is putting together. Of course, Vandana Shiva's against that. She says, you know, seeds are best stored in the earth, on a bank where they can create more killer seeds. But do you believe that this is tied in with the eugenics movement?
Oh, that's a very provocative question. Number one, my understanding of the seed bank was that it was actually trying to preserve original seeds, not mutant seeds. And I am absolutely opposed to anything that is essentially a regression in Earth history. And that's what Monsanto is. I mean, they literally are setting us back thousands of years. And I think we should put them out of business. And what? Well, I don't know. One of the things you could do is start shipping decent seed to India. I mean, I don't know. But I do believe that 1 billion rich people can bring 5 billion poor people up and bypass the corporations. Okay, and that's why at the end of my book, I have a global range of gifts table. And this is all about one-to-one giving, micro-giving, exact giving, precision giving, with no intermediaries other than those that volunteer to help with language, FedEx, whatever.
How do you bypass the parasites in the chain? Those who stop the gift from getting where it needs to go or stop it from...
Well, the question is, how do you bypass the parasites of the chain? And I think I had a slide that showed that. Has this frozen? Okay, here we go. I mean, look at this. There are no parasites in this chain. Here in number one, this guy needs a new part. It's amazing how many, and the U.S. has really totally screwed up Iraq. I mean, a lot of the stuff they brought in was 1950s, 1960s trucks. Okay, some of them needed a crank to turn. But this guy needs a new part for a 1950s Romanian water pump. So this person, a passing tourist, texts the need into a database. Okay, UNICEF is doing some remarkable things with SMS. They call it rapid SMS. And rapid SMS can fill a web back office, which can then visualize the information. Okay, so that goes into a database. A Romanian with national pride says, hey, we no longer sell that part in Romania, but I can make it on the lathe in my garage. You know, most engineers have a lathe in their garage, at least the ones I know. And so he makes it, and then he says, but I can't pay the FedEx. And so a German comes in and says, hey, this is cool. I'll pay for the FedEx. And it goes down here, and then a Spanish tourist says, I'll deliver it, and I'll post a picture. There are no parasites in this chain. It's one-to-one, zero resistance. Okay? And I was thinking of something else, and I forget. I'm getting old, Alzheimer's or whatever. By the way, Alzheimer's they think is mad cow disease. It's been misdiagnosed. And have you seen where what's this? There's a disease that they've just realized is actually something that's caused by blood that blocks the brain, and if you relieve the blood pressure on the brain, it's like MS or. Yeah, I mean, it's just amazing what we're learning. And a big part of the problem is medical schools have become bureaucracies, and they've sold out to the pharmaceuticals. And so they've stopped learning. My doctor no longer reads medical journals. I was giving shit to one of these publishers because they're publishing crap that's been written by pharmaceuticals and signed by someone who's been paid to sign the article. Stop doing drugs. Well, you know, I gotta tell you, I have a real problem with it seems like a day does not go by that the pharmaceutical industry doesn't invent a new disease, you know, like TCIP. You know, or yeah, you know, or whatever. You're suffering from moron not taking enough drugs syndrome. You know, I mean, it's crazy. No. It's not the moron that they're worried about. It's the fact that you're not taking enough drugs. Okay. Okay, come on over here, and then we'll go back there.
Well, you got a lot to say there, but I do a lot of biology, and I work with that. So I mean, there's a lot of humor in this, but there is a lot of good medicine out there, a lot of good stuff there, and it's an education. It's information overload in medicine. Some of these things you're talking about, they've been suspected for many years. The cancer vaccines, it was 20, 30 years ago that they were starting to suspect, but as the tools, I mean, IT, we use IT for computational biology, and we're coming across these. So the stuff is happening, but it's information load in every area. Basic. I mean,
I respect what you're saying.
I'm a biologist.
No. I respect what you're saying, but I also have seen too much documentation of patents being withheld.
There's all sorts of stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, I work in actually looking for, well,
I think what I would put to you is that we're probably halfway where we could be if we had integrity.
Everywhere. Oh, that's for sure. Everywhere.
Okay, so bottom line is let's get integrity back into the system.
There's still information overload.
Yeah, but see, let's talk about information.
Let's talk about it in the IT. How many stupid people are out there that, I mean, we should be over this. What is it? Office automation. We did it 20, 30 years ago.
Yeah, but we went in the wrong direction.
Clearly.
And I'll tell you what, Bill Gates has been a cancer in many ways. Not least because he's been mutating APIs for the last 30 years just to set up toll booths.
Well, the alternatives are coming in. I mean, we actually say GIMP instead of Photoshop. I mean, it's not going to have penetration
cool.
yet, but whatever. It's, you know, things will change.
100% Microsoft free.
I mean, actually, some of these Linux installs bug me. Whatever happened to do a custom install? Whatever happened to seeing what's happening when the computer starts up?
I want a goddamn black rotary phone that I can dial. You know, I mean, this stuff should be idiot-proof. Can you guys see this? All right, let me try and do this. What is it? F5? Function F5?
Just look for the little monitor picture. All laptops change. You found it. F11 for full screen.
And then you want to hit Control plus 11.
What are you trying to do? Oh, yeah, right.
Is it? No, I'm not sure. No, the graphic, I'm sorry. I can't make the graphic the full screen.
Well, Control plus.
All right.
Control plus and just navigate the position. No, you switch screens again.
Oh, can you see the drool? I'm afraid we can't make that into a big screen because it's just a JPEG.
Control plus in the modern browsers enlarges the whole.
Modern browsers.
Control plus.
I just took my parents to Best Buy, and I felt I was like one evolutionary step behind them.
Well, I'm saying.
Yeah, this is just a.
Netscape always means you can enlarge the font.
Well, look, no. Let me just go on from here. This was created, and this was created by Dick Clavens and Brett Ashford. Dick is just an absolute genius, and he's got lifetime rights to the Institute of Scientific Information Citation Analysis database, and he's created some remarkable stuff. But this is actually the web of knowledge, and this is the fragmentation. The sciences are up on top, and the humanities are down below, and social science is kind of out to lunch. But cognitive science and collective intelligence are the scientific and humanities side of bringing all of this back together. And coming back to your comment on technology, where we have failed is we haven't done the processing. The United States intelligence community processes less than 2% of what it collects. Okay? I mean, NSA's numbers as of 10 years ago were 6% of the Russians, 3% of the Chinese, and 1% of everything else. Huh? Oh, no, because then you couldn't pay SAIC to fuck it up. I know. And again, it comes back to integrity. The directors of NSA have not had integrity, and I particularly include Lieutenant General Alexander, who killed Abel Danger because it revealed two of the 9/11 people beforehand. And what I found is that government lawyers, when they don't know, they say you shouldn't do this. And so he had bad lawyers, and he had a particularly stupid SES that I knew was a GS-12, which he should never have risen beyond. And so General Alexander literally did not do what he should have done, which is turn the information over to the FBI. And so this is a lack of integrity. All right, in the back, sir.
I actually have two questions. The first one is, what are some fictional books you might recommend, if there are any?
Bulletproof.
Okay. And also,
Bulletproof. It's real stuff.
And have you heard about the Italian doctor who found that certain cancers were curable from baking soda?
No, but I believe it. And this is the thing that really frosts me. There is so much knowledge in the world, and it's not being disseminated. I mean, we have concentrated wealth and fragmented knowledge. It should be the other way around. And so this is the kind of stuff that I'm hoping that a World Brain would create a virtual World Health thing. And, you know, I love Larry Brilliant, but anybody, and Vince Cerf I used to love, but anybody that will sell out to Google is got a problem. Because Google has no interest in making sense. Google wants to basically own your information and sell it back to you. And I recommend the books by Steve Arnold. Yes, sir.
What are your thoughts on national sovereignty? And, well, given the new economy, obviously where things are either crumbling or getting stale, what are the borders going to look like? Are they going to be what they are presently or what we've been taught for the last 50 years? And how do you envision them changing in the next, say, 5 to 10?
Well, let me answer that at 3 levels. Number one, individual sovereignty is absolute if you're keeping your integrity. And one of the problems we have is too many people are sacrificing their integrity to authority that is of questionable value. And so that's number one. Number two, the state does serve a very good purpose in terms of order and conservation and economies of scale and certain other things. However, the state gets dysfunctional when it tries to manage what it doesn't understand. And we've reached that point. We've been at that point since the 1960s. So I believe that some states will survive, but I commend to your attention the book by Joel Garrow called The 9 Nations of North America. Absolutely excellent, excellent book on how we're logically 9 nations.
Go Cascadia.
All right, go Cascadia. There's also Salmon Nation. There's a fish that wants to dominate you. Yeah, I mean, it's serious, you know. And finally, I'll end by saying that so many of the borders that we imposed on Africa and Latin America should just go away. They just make no sense at all. And we also have to look at the whole issue. Australia is now struggling with the whole issue of native land rights. And we need to get there. The Native American Indians, unfortunately, they decided that booze and gambling was a fair trade-off for their cultural heritage. I don't think it was that good a deal. I'm sorry? Yeah. I mean, all of these embargoes, these are idiocy. In fact, someone just wrote a good book called Invisible War. I mean, that killing 500 kids in Iraq was worth it, or Iran. Killing 500 kids in Iran was worth it. What kind of idiot would say that? Well, Madeleine Albright, Hillary Clinton, you know, I mean, this is the kind of people that think that this makes sense because they lack a solid ethical and philosophical foundation and they've lost their integrity. Yeah, in the back?
Yeah, one thing that I had heard around on the internet was that that the intelligence community wasn't really after nation building. The intelligence community has always been around after trying to get the terrorists, trying to track down Al Qaeda. And actually, I've heard several military people on the other hand actually saying that they're getting kind of annoyed that some of the military guys actually want them to start doing nation building. But the intelligence community in general seems to be resistant to that and seems to be more just trying to nail it.
Well, it's not just the intelligence community, it's the entire military industrial complex because nation building doesn't pay as much for doing less. You actually have to build the nation. You're held accountable for results. We had a chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff that said real men don't do operations other than war. And one of the problems that we have is that the U.S. government is dysfunctional. I mean, DOD is dysfunctional, but at least it can move, shoot, and communicate. And there's a whole new meme about whole of government and all of this. The Department of State, the Department of Commerce, all of these other departments, they can't surge. They don't have a foreign service. They have really fat bureaucrats that sit in Washington and spend half their time on the internet I mean, one of the things I've found in a unit that I'm working with is we have to turn off Facebook and YouTube. I mean, we actually have to shut them out or we lose 30% productivity. And this is even in Guatemala, in this particular unit. I've lost my train of thought again. Boy, this is scary. Mad cow disease? No, I don't know. Come back. Bring me back. Where were we?
We were talking about DOD.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you know, part of I mean, Medard Gabel was Buckminster Fuller's '2. He's now a guru in his own right. He runs Big Picture, Small World. He's a master of sustainable design workshops, and people start out in these small groups, and about halfway through the design workshop, they have the aha experience of, oh shit, we have to all come together and be a system of systems think tank, okay? And Medard has costed out what it would take to solve every problem on the face of the planet. Clean water, disease, everything, $230 billion. Well, we in the United States are spending $1.3 trillion a year on the instruments of war, not even on being competent at war, just the instruments of war. So what you have here is this total disconnect between reality and, as Senator Sam Nunn used to say, you really have to understand the threat, and then you have to have a strategy, and then within that strategy you design a force structure, and then with that force structure you then design a campaign plan and so forth. The single best dollar on the planet is in the education of women. And one of the things that, oh really, and one of the things, Michael O'Hanlon's book, Half Penny on the Dollar, is excellent. I mean, he's one of the guys I think is a clear thinker, even if he is a Democrat. One of the points that Janos makes is that lending money to women is like 10 to 15 times more effective than lending money to men. And that's absolutely fascinating. And I have myself found that women make better analysts because they have smaller egos and more intuition. So there's a lot of stuff we can do right in the future. Did you have a follow-on?
Yes, I did, actually. Very quickly. Well, since we're already in Afghanistan, I mean, I guess Iraq War seems to be wrapping up. At least the casualties down, but Afghanistan is a bit escalating recently. Now, if you could have been in charge of it, what would you have done differently? And do you think we should leave Afghanistan as is now, or do you think we should are emboldened to kind of like obligated to finish this nation building and stabilize it before we leave?
First off, we can't afford to fix it now, and we broke it worse than it was. You know, Charlie Wilson died recently, but Charlie Wilson was one hell of a congressman, and it's really amazing how far a handsome drunken Texan can get if he's got his heart in the right place. And Charlie Wilson had his heart in the right place. I highly recommend the DVD and the book, or my review of the book. When we drove the Soviets out of Afghanistan, and kind of the backstory on Charlie Wilson is that CIA never wanted to actually do what we did in Afghanistan. They wanted to just harass the Soviets. And Charlie Wilson came in and said, bullshit, we're going to drive the Soviets out. And we did. Unfortunately, 200 of our Stinger missiles are now in Iran. And, you know, we made a lot of mistakes along the way. But when we drove the Soviets out of Afghanistan, Charlie Wilson went to the congressional committees and said, let's sustain the funding level, but redirect it to schools and roads and water, which happens to be a particularly desperate problem in Afghanistan. And they said no. Okay, so we blew it right there. And finally, one of the problems we have is we are so screwed up here at home. I mean, we've been exporting jobs. We've got major policy issues, population issues that we're not dealing with. We've got major water issues, power issues, transportation issues, health issues, agricultural issues. If I had been in charge after 9/11, I would have said, shit, imperialism just came home to roost. And maybe what we should do is pull back. I mean, I personally think bin Laden is right in many respects, and so does Michael Schur. And read my reviews of Michael Schur's books, Imperial Hubris and so forth. We should not be supporting a despotic regime of 60,000 princes, many of them perverts, who kidnap young starlets from the United States for $50,000 on a by-name basis. I mean, this is ridiculous. So bin Laden has a point, and we missed the point. So from where I sit, Afghanistan at this point cannot be saved, because what we have done is we have aroused every national xenophobic bone in that country. We have put a corrupt asshole in charge. His warlord, drug lord brother is feeding him hashish at the same time that he's running opium into Pakistan. And this is a no-win solution. I mean, the biggest single most important word with respect to insurgency and nation building is legitimacy. The United States of America has zero legitimacy in Afghanistan because the Afghan government has zero legitimacy in Afghanistan, in my opinion. Okay.
But the Israelis are Nazis.
What? The Israelis are what?
I said, but the Israelis are Nazis.
Oh, so are the Americans in their own way. So are the Americans. And don't misunderstand me. I love Heratz. I love Howard Bloom, who's a Zionist. Huh? Look, the Israelis are going to have to come to grips with the fact that they're building walls. They're building ghettos. I mean, if you go into Israel and you look at the Jewish settlements with roads and soccer fields and swimming pools, and you look at the Palestinians right next to them, who are incidentally Israeli citizens, I'm sorry, but that is a crime against humanity. Okay.
I have to comment on that.
Oh, please do.
So, how is it different? You know, you talked about, you know, the Native Americans or the Mexicans. You know, when you form a nation, you can't just say, excuse me, can you move over? We're going to make better use of your resources. You know, what is your suggestion when you're dealing with protecting the security of the Israeli people when they're having bombs, you know, they're being attacked and they have to protect their security? What is your concept there?
One of the problems that Israel faces is it's like General Custer's last stand, you know. We've got the enemy right where we want them. They're all around. You know, it ain't gonna work.
So they'd be knee deep in some.
Look, I mean, I'm a military officer. I'm an intelligence professional, and I taught the UN class before one on open source intelligence in Beirut in August of 2007. What Israel has done to Beirut is a crime against humanity, and it is absolutely intolerable to me. It is bad military judgment. It is collective punishment. It is in every sense of the word in the Nazi tradition. And building walls around specific villages is so insane as to cause me to wonder what kind of citizen would support a government that does that to anybody. Okay, I'm sorry, it's wrong. Now, what you have going for you is that the Rothschilds are still in power, and there is a Jewish diaspora that has power in every country of the world, and I would focus on that.
What about the U.S. border at Mexico?
Hey, the Guadalupe Hidalgo line is gone. Get used to it. Okay, now, I think that, kind of sort of answering one of the questions from before, we're moving to a situation of panarchy. Panarchy is the opposite of anarchy, okay? Panarchy is when you can have multiple loyalties, okay? And you can be a rich and vibrant member of the Jewish community without being a traitor to America. I mean, I'm talking ideal America, not the government of America. You can be you can be any one of a number of diversity groups and be part of the sense-making and the judgment and all of that, and you do it because you have clarity and diversity and integrity, all right? Because what's the problem that I am finding with most governments and most organizations is that they're becoming cult-like, and I certainly include every religion in America, okay? And so they become cult-like, And you have Opus Dei doing crimes against humanity. And you have the Mormons basically stealing shit out of CIA and the FBI. And you have, of course, the Islamic radicals doing very bad things. And I'm frankly astounded that the Americans are so naive. I mean, Steve Emerson is a good friend of mine, and he was blacklisted from journalism in 1994 because he did an undercover PBS one-hour documentary on imams on American soil calling for the murder of Americans. And FBI didn't want to touch it. Religious freedom. I mean, we literally have a stupid government. And it's not stupid because the people are stupid. It's stupid because we have a bureaucracy that is at the end of its life. I mean, it's Walking Dead stupid with politicians who really don't want a smart bureaucracy. And that's the problem that we have. And with respect, I think we have to confront the truth. The chairman of Saatchi & Saatchi in Japan says, no matter how ugly it is, until you get the truth at the table, you can't deal with it. And I think the Middle East is a place where we should be able to wage peace. And frankly, Howard Bloom in Global Brain has the answer. By the time every Palestinian and every Israeli kid is 5 years old, they know as an absolute fact communicated directly from Yahweh that the other guy is a monkey and a pig. Okay? And that's wrong. So I would occupy the Middle East for 50 years. And I would raise an entire new generation that learns to live in peace and that applies our tax dollars for peace rather than war.
There is some of that. And education.
Yes. Okay, let's go back to you guys. By the way, you'll notice that I have to pee more and more frequently as we move towards 6 o'clock. But stay with me. Huh? I actually thought about doing this apple juice urine thing on you guys, but decided it was too much trouble. Go on.
You mentioned that 230 billion would solve the world's
Yeah.
problems.
I actually have a slide on it. Let me try and bring it up. Go ahead.
Has anyone mentioned this to Warren Buffett or the Bill Gates Foundation? Aren't they supposed to be doing something with...
I think Gates... What's that? Shit, how do I...
Just click don't send. They need to know though.
I need a personal... I used to have a cartoon in which two IT guys are developing a new software. And so the first cartoon says, okay, we're developing this great new software. And then the second cartoon is say, you know, remember, we're never going to meet an end user. So the guy says, okay, make it so it crashes on every typo. You know, all right, how do I get my screen back?
Don't send an F11.
Wait, I got the F11 part, but what?
Hit don't send.
Oh, yeah, it's the same function.
Let's all stand around talking about it. That'll get it fixed.
All right. Oh, God, you're a genius. I swear, man. I'm mindless bickering. Okay, I'm there for you. Hang on a second. Graphic, Medard, Gabel, 230. Let me see if that brings it up. By the way, you can have a lot of fun just going through all of the graphics in here. Let's see, UN intelligence. Let's see if we've got the graphic in here. I think we might. Multilateral sharing, UN tools. Not looking good. Strategic analytic model. You should take a look at that. Future of OSINT is M3. Intelligence. Oh shit. Okay. Huh? Yeah. Open space reinvention. All right. Let's try it another way. This is just really fun here. Multinational plus strategic.
What's the keyword you're looking for?
Well, unfortunately I don't know.
I would suggest Control F, but
what's Control F?
Well, find things on the page.
Oh, but not here. This page doesn't have it. It would have been there. Let's try it another way. Graphic, Medard, Gabel. The guy's a genius. Okay, here we go. And I'm going to let you look at this while I go to the bathroom. But you can. What's that? Oh, I'm good for another 2 hours, absolutely. I'm good till the sun comes up. I can tell that you guys are spread out roughly in the same order that you would be in your 4th grade classroom. So up here we have the spring butts that want to get straight A's, and back there we the guys that are coasting. By the way, if you see anyone taking notes on my speeches, they work for the CIA. Yeah, there you go. Spot the Fed. Interpol, let's not go there. Okay, next. Oh, this. Medard Gabel has a book I think something just fell. All right, Medard Gabel has been struggling with a book called 7 Billion Billionaires. But he's done some work on this before in article form, and I highly recommend it, like 4 Billion Billionaires.
Sorry.
Okay.
Is this thing on?
Yeah, but I'm not talking to you yet, nor am I listening.
My bad.
Okay. So Medard put this together, and he gave me permission to use it, but it's absolutely, utterly brilliant, and I don't want to waste your time looking for the slide, but if you pull this JPEG and put it on a PowerPoint slide, you can look at it in detail. Or you can actually look for...
I'm sorry.
Sure.
My bad.
Might not work. Just control. Where's the plus symbol? Is that working?
Sorry, I need to move away from the...
I'm not worthy.
No.
I'm not worthy.
It was not intentional.
God, wow. Control plus. Anyway, this is really very, very intelligent stuff. It's been rigorously documented by Medard. I have absolute faith in his numbers. The fact is that we're reaching a point now where if enough people just say no, we might actually get some common sense into government. I really am torn because on the one hand, I want to be a good law-abiding citizen, and on the other hand, I think that we are very close to needing to go on a nationwide tax revolt. And so I don't know what the answer is.
Anarchy.
Come to the microphone, and then we'll come to you in the back. But this guy, for many, many reasons, has to have pride of place.
No, I wasn't trying
No, hang on. We'll come right back to you. Go.
Every government has a life cycle. At a certain point in the overall life cycle of a government, the government starts to becoming self-serving, and its primary interest is the service of the government and not of the people for which it was designed and developed to serve. So let's assume for a moment that we did have a day of protest. Let's assume that there is some kind of Uber Tea Party that spreads out across the country. And
Uber Tea Party? I love it. Uberlici!
That's a copyrighted term.
Come to me, Uberlici! I like it.
Okay, let's assume that there is a public insurrection, resurrection, whatever you want to call it.
Did you say erection? I'm sorry. I'm trying to wake up the guys in the back, okay? I mean, right now I'm a distraction to them. Okay, go on.
What would the government's response be if they felt that their control over the populace through taxation and federal, state, and government legislation and various other kinds of things?
Gandhi. I watch that video like once every 2 months. Nonviolent resistance.
Protest the other way.
The government, part of what I have learned the hard way is you have to give people a back door. And one of the things that I really believe strongly is that you have to wind the government down slowly. I mean, the last thing you want to do is put I don't know how many million civil servants we have, most of them double wides. But the last thing you want to do in an economy that has 22% unemployment is put the federal government out of work. Okay? That's not cool. But what you can do is have a 10-year plan that downsizes the government by 10% every year, and that basically is I've learned I have to tell this to congressmen, is job and revenue neutral, district by district. Okay? So what I'm really talking about here is not flipping the system, but actually migrating the system in a very intelligent way from its current place to a future place. And the idealistic vision that I have is that if enough people start saying this will not stand and say we prefer this, then we might actually get what we want. Right now, the government is dangerous to itself and to us. It is really hurting the world. It is really hurting us. And there's a wonderful book called The 50-Year Wound by Lieberg, Derek Lieberg, I think, Liebart. He's a very noted military historian. I mean, the Soviets didn't have any air defenses in the north until we started running strategic air missions into the north of Russia to see how far we could get. Okay? I mean, the idiocy of what the United States government has done in our name over the last 50 years is just beyond comprehension. And it's a burden for me to have read all these books. Because I ask myself, why the hell hasn't everybody else read all these books? And so I get very frustrated because it's all there. It's all in the open. But what we have not been given is the tools to do sense-making together and the tools to aggregate and visualize citizen opinion. And that, I think, is the next big step. And that was one of the slides in my briefing, which if you go to Phi Beta Iota anytime, you will find the briefing. This is great. Geriatric websites. Okay. This lecture, Hacking Humanity. Okay, so if you click on this, it's the brief and it has the words in notes format. So, sir, you've been very patient in the back. Go ahead.
Thanks. I'm not a citizen of this country, but I read a book while I was in Cuba called The Collapse of Complex Societies, and we keep talking about where America's going from here, and you nodded, and I can only imagine that based on everything you've read that you actually have read that one. And you know, it's fine that we talk about where maybe America should go. Again, I'm not a citizen here, so I can only kind of observe. But are we up against the collapse of a complex society here? And if so, what's next?
How do I reverse the geriatric thing? Control minus? Yes. Holy holy! Oh, this is just too cool. All right, now the plus is on the top, so that's a little harder. What?
Control zero.
Control zero. Oh, you clever devils, you moved it. Okay. No, I've had enough education for the day. I can't take this anymore. Okay. Down here, hold on. Down here.
You read a book on it.
Hold on. Be patient. Be tolerant. All right. Complexity and Catastrophe, 68 books. Complexity and Resilience, 87 books. And I probably have read that book. And what it boils down to is real-time feedback loops, okay? Government is incapable of real-time feedback loops, and government is incapable of seeing the whole system. And that guest review that I provided on bureaucracy in there by one of the top academics on bureaucracy essentially says that one of the problems with bureaucracies is that they continue to acquire interests. And basically, it's like adding on, you know? It's like you start out with a Toyota, and then over time, it turns into a tank. And you wonder why you can't get it to get to the supermarket on less than 1,000 gallons, okay? And so that's our government. And so what turns out to be really, really important for resilience in the face of complexity is distribution and bottom-up sense-making and bottom-up alerting and all of this stuff. And so really what we have right now is a central government at the end of its life. And yet we have not gotten the local governments to any point of coherence or integrity. And it may well be that we see secession. I mean, Hawaii is poised to secede from the Union. They managed to get an apology from the U.S. government into the congressional record, which essentially is an admission by the U.S. government that they invaded and occupied Hawaii against the wishes of the Hawaiians. I mean, Sarah Palin, if she had a little bit more smarts, would have stayed governor of Alaska and then become president of Alaska and made the Yukon and Northwest Territories an offer they couldn't refuse. Okay?
Canada loves that shit. We're not giving that up.
Wait, the Yukon and Northwest Territories? For sure. Eh? All right, go on, sir, please.
The one feeling I get from a lot of the talk from people about, you know, lack of centralized government is that it should be all about, you know, the lower tier people ruling the country. And I think a lot of times you, like when you say lower tier, it's like the populace in general. It's the people who are against, you know, people who are going to universities and having PhDs. It's the, you know, the whole Tea Party movement saying, you know, I don't think that's right just because they have a degree or, you know, just because they have a master's degree, they should be ruling the country. Well, the one thing I have to say, though, is a lot of this message that I hear being spouted is coming from corporations who are basically doing the same thing, but in the corporate fashion. And what's your view on that, the fact that the corporations are just trying to use the populace in some sort of message that's anti-government, when in fact it's the Wayloon, you know, Utani Wayloon future of, you know, ownership by the corporation tells me my, you know, my pension and stuff like that.
I think you're right, and corporations can be trusted even less than government. Forgive me, I have to scratch my back. This is now my swagger stick as well, you know, doesn't it make me look distinguished? This is Intelligence Collective, and there's like 68 books in here. Hidden Wealth of Nations, Global Shift, you know, this is Tom Atlee. I love him. He introduced me to the whole Seattle mindset. I tried to get my wife to move, and apart from the fact that she works for the CIA and has 5 years to go to retirement, she said tidal waves, earthquakes, and rain. Okay, fuck. You know, I had brains, spirit, heart, but okay, Living Universe. Anyway, there's a bunch of really good books that you can just flip through here on this Intelligence Collective. It's really cool. This one's very special. Non-Zero, The Logic of Human... by the way, if you go to this website and you just want to see the cream of the cream, go to 6-star special. 94 out of 1,600 book reviews. Okay, and just work your way down through those 94, and you've got what I think. Now, this is very interesting. This is a movie about Americans torturing Americans, and it's an almost exact split between the people with brains who like my review and the people without brains who think anything goes, America, love it or leave it. And it's quite remarkable.
What was your review?
You'll have to read it. But it was a good review. I mean, it was a review that talked about the meaning of the film. And one of the things that's so really frightening is the degree to which ignorance serves as a foundation for authoritarianism. I mean, if you're really, really ignorant, you can think you're really, really right and not be.
With that comment, though, in that movie, you can be on either side.
Well, I personally have found that torture does not work. Torture causes you to chase false leads. Stuart Harrington, a colonel who was one of the top counterintelligence guys in the U.S. Army, ran a prisoner interrogation thing on an island off the coast of Panama. And he treated them like human beings with great dignity, and his record has never been equaled for actionable, verifiable intelligence. Okay? In Iraq, we sweep through neighborhoods and pick up 50 people. And they go to an Abu Ghraib and spend months before someone finally gets around to them and then eventually releases them. I just previewed a book called Surrender to Kindness, which is about Afghanistan. And it's a remarkable book. It's almost like a silent spring for how we interact with foreign cultures and how we use the wrong tool. Surrender to Kindness. It'll be released at the end of August, and it's really quite a special book.
Why do we have to test that every couple generations when even as far back as the Romans, they knew that torture does not produce good quality intelligence?
I've struggled with that for many years, and I really keep going back to Will Durant's book, Philosophy and the Social Problem. One of the things that Plato said, which Durant points out, is that the highest minister of the land should be the minister of education. And George Will has done a book of collected articles that talks about statecraft as soulcraft. Okay, we lost our soul. The United States of America gave it up after World War II. We were on the right track with the Marshall Plan. And then we let CIA go crazy with Nazis and too much money and gold certificates and Italian, Japanese, and German politicians on our CIA payroll. And basically, it became fashionable for CIA to basically fuck around where it had no right to be. And so the clandestine tail started wagging the analytic dog to the point that CIA lost its mind. Panetta got all of my books. I knew Panetta was going to be appointed a week before it came out, and I got all my books to him at his institute. I made sure that they were delivered and that the box was open, and he just completely blew it off. And he was perfectly suited as a former director of OMB and as a former chief of staff of the White House to actually know what the president needed to know to be effective. And Panetta fell for the DO blowjob. They just sucked him right in, forgive the analogy. He's lost his manhood at CIA. They have just eaten him up. Now, you know, that really is kind of graphic, but anyway, that's the fact. Mineta lacks balls and his dick has been cut off. Yes, sir.
So I think you might have started, but top 5 books on your reading list that we should all in this room walk away and read.
The 2 for sale outside.
The signature's not worth any money. The signature's not worth any money.
No, I know that. I know that. And the book is being sold at cost. I mean, $20 for On Intelligence and $10 for the new one, which I'm very pleased with. Durant, I would say, you know what? 2 out of the 5 would be Durant. The first one is Philosophy and the Social Problem. The second one is The Lessons of History. And one of the things he says in Lessons of History is that morality has a strategic value beyond price. And that's absolutely right. And this isn't about the Pope's divisions because, I mean, we have a quasi-Nazi Pope now, and we've had popes in the past that have been brutally vicious, authoritarian against liberation theology, which was actually one of the best ideas the Jesuits have had in the last century. Liberation theology could have saved Latin America, and participatory budgeting in Brazil, which the Brazilian government chose to ignore. So certainly Durant's Philosophy and the Social Problem and Durant and Will and Ariel Durant's Lessons of History. The other 3...
Absolute favorites.
Is that a name of a book?
No, your absolute favorites.
Well, you know, I like Kuhn. I like Kuhn in part because his point is that until nothing makes sense, the old paradigm survives. And one of the problems that we've had is that people have been very, very lax about questioning the old paradigms. And so we've kind of been letting people go along with illusion. I mean, there's this famous quote from the White House where someone is trying to say, but reality is, and someone, possibly Rove or Cheney, is saying, oh, you must be one of those reality people. We're an empire. We make our own reality. Well, what? The dumbest bastard on the planet. Okay, according to General Franks. Well, Trotsky liked to say, and I saw this quote in Toffler's book on war and anti-war, Trotsky liked to say, you may not be interested in war, but war is interested in you. And so I like to say, you may not be interested in reality, but reality is very interested in you. Okay, so you got to get a grip. And I think it's irresponsible of the U.S. government to ignore reality, and I think it's irresponsible of us to let it get away with ignoring reality. And frankly, I think we should drive every goddamn congressman out of office for having gone along with all of this. Now, the senators, we can only get rid of 1/3 of them. But I think we should literally flush the Senate and the House down the toilet. And I pause so that someone can make that a YouTube thing tomorrow. I think ideas on how... I wouldn't be here. What? No, you know, I've actually conceptualized getting some people together and creating a Google map of the Earth, and then having a plan where at a certain moment in time, 1 million tires are set on fire in exact geospatial locations that spell enough with an exclamation mark running from San Francisco to New York. That would be pretty cool. So organize that. What? Okay. Next are... what's... Well, instead of the 5 books, why don't you read all 1,600 of my reviews, and then when we meet in 2 years, you can tell me what the 5 books are. Huh? Yeah, you know, I struggle. I mean, it really, Durant really shines. Will Durant is just an amazing human being, and his wife was obviously a saint. But what they accomplished with their history of civilization, which I have not read, but I've read kind of the capstone stuff, has been absolutely phenomenal. And I would say Philosophy and the Social Problem, hands down, the first book. Lessons of History, the second. And I really struggled to name a third, fourth, and fifth. But somewhere in there, it's all about collective intelligence. And, you know, there's this whole literature, Wisdom of the Crowds, Groundswell, Here Comes Everybody. I've reviewed all those books. And what it boils down to is no one person has it all, and we've got to learn to think as a community. And that's my definition of God, as community. So, ma'am, you have a question.
Questions about Obama's citizenship are now even in the National Enquirer in the grocery store. What have you heard of him giving up his citizenship when he was adopted as a child by his stepdad in Indonesia?
I have heard a great deal. I cannot state with certainty, but I'm fairly certain that his citizenship was given up on his behalf by someone else. And I'm fairly certain that there's something going on in Hawaii that's been heavily paid for. I'm fairly... All right, I've been asked to keep going. What it boils down to for me, because, I mean, look at George Bush. The stuff about Bush and the Bush family that did not come out is basically an indictment of the media as a controlled press. And even the indie medias of the world were not able to make a dent, and Counterpunch and so forth. Too few of us read those. And there is no... I really love this whole flash mob thing, and I really like real-time Twitter intelligence. I've got a slide in here, a graphic. On Twitter, I can now see where everybody is and basically ask a specific person via Twitter, what do you see? Here's a quick true story, just stream of consciousness. When When Clinton ordered a missile to hit the Libyan intelligence center, the intelligence community could not tell him whether they had hit it. And so unbeknownst to them, he called the president of CNN, who called the CNN bureau in Jordan, who called a photographer that they knew lived across the street from the Libyan intelligence center. And he said, yeah, it's burning. Okay. That's kind of a statement on the complete inadequacy of the U.S. intelligence community and the marvelous capabilities of independent verification, and somehow we're just not getting it together. You know, you guys are a small spike. I mean, there's this spike theory of change, which is you don't try and raise the whole society. You just kind of pop a little spike up, and then another little spike comes, and then eventually the whole thing. Huh? All right. Bottom line is I'm an optimist. I believe that we're getting close to a turning point. I'm really concerned about the cell phones hurting the bees. But at the same time, I think we're going to end up having not only cell phones, but local grids where we make our own power. You know, Buckminster Fuller conceptualized an electric grid for the entire world that is really well laid out. And it's just, maybe we need to crash in order to move on. And I regret not selling both my properties in Washington when the market was at its height. And I read the long emergency, and I said, I'm going to sell out and move. And my wife said, the fuck you are. So it's kind of tough. And other questions, sir, or comment?
Well, first off, I think the bee, personally, I believe the bee problem is kind of blown out of proportion, but there's another study was recently released which correlates the bee colonies diminishing with actually American farmers changing over to more of, I guess you'd say, plants that bees don't go for.
I love it. I love it. And I absolutely agree that that's the kind of, I mean, we have to do holistic analysis.
I'm not even talking about like genetically altered plants out there.
No, I'm with you.
There are lots of basic plants out there, like various.
They're not getting the high that they're used to.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I'm completely with you. And that's where biomimicry and the whole real-time science and holistic understanding and all of this has to come into play. I mean, I almost feel like we've just been born and humanity has just kind of popped out of the shell and we're now at the beginning of being a conscious species. Barbara Marx Hubbard, who, by the way, was the other vice presidential candidate with Geraldine Ferraro. So she's done a book on conscious evolution, and she has a DVD on emergence. So did you want to say anything else?
Yes, I actually had two other things I wanted to ask. One, your opinion on the whole non-proliferation. A lot of the countries around the world, the Non-Proliferation Act was big for a while. But if anything, the situation with Iran is kind of, at least seems to me right now, it's kind of the inadequacies of it. It's like it's kind of having a big bark with no bite. I don't see any way that we could stop Iran or any of the other countries from developing one without short of going to war, and I don't think the issue is worth going to war over. So it's kind of, I'm kind of at a point where I have to question myself, what is the point of non-proliferation? And I'm curious what your opinion on it is.
First, then I'm going to sit down. Oh, no. I mean, I was going to wear a suit for you guys, but... Yeah, there we go. Thanks. And I'll move over. How's that? Okay. There's a number of comments that I'll make. First off, the most serious proliferation problem on the planet is small arms, followed by the sale of military arms by all of the permanent members of the National Security Council. Of the UN Security Council. The United States sells 5 times more arms than Russia does, followed by the United Kingdom and then China. We're hypocrites, and that should stop. We should certainly have a very strong military. We actually need 4 militaries, a big war military, a small war military, a peace war military, and a home war military. but we should not be arming other nations. That's just plain dumb. And however much we may argue that if we don't do it, someone else will, I think we will be stronger if we place our emphasis on building peace capabilities.
I completely agree with you, but it was actually more nuclear non-proliferation. I was kind of
I'm with you. There's more nuclear in hospitals than we have any clue about. I mean, during the Olympics, our big fear was the University of Georgia nuclear reactor, which just would have made a fantastic birthday cake. So I think the whole proliferation thing is oversold, and I think one of the big problems we have is that Iran has a perfectly legitimate right to not only have nuclear power, but we gave Pakistan, Brzezinski, gave Pakistan the Sunni nuclear bomb. Iran doesn't give a shit about the United States. They're able to suck us into taking out Iraq and Afghanistan anytime they want because they know we're stupid, okay? They're scared shitless about Saudi Arabia and Pakistan wiping out the Shiites, okay? So I would focus on making sure that there was clean energy available for everyone, that there was clean water available for everyone, and I would focus on, Ron Paul has this foreign policy of peace and commerce. So for me, proliferation is largely a waste of time, and we have no business talking when we can't even count our own nuclear missiles, and we lose them when they cross the country.